Now we're going to look at the muscles of the upper limb. We've already looked at the deltoid, so the next group of muscles we will look at are your shoulder rotator cuff. So if you've heard of your rotator cuff muscles, they help to stabilize your shoulder joint. The tendons of all of these muscles kind of hold that joint in place. So you have 4. To remember the order that they go in, just work superiorly to inferiorly. Remember the acronym SITS. You have the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, the teres minor, and the subscapularis muscle. So you can use your context clues. Supra means above. Spinatus would be the spine of the scapula, so it's above the spine of the scapula. And then infra is below, so it's below the spine, infraspinatus. And then we'll actually hide some of this. That way you can see how these kind of wrap around. Okay, so it's nice to be able to kind of see how these wrap around and attach onto that humerus. Okay, so we have SI and then T, teres minor. Remember, if there's a minor and a major, the minor's on top. Okay, the teres major is not part of the rotator cuff because you can see here it actually doesn't go and help stabilize that shoulder joint. Okay, but there's the major right below the minor. So then the last rotator cuff muscle is the subscapularis. So subscapularis would mean that it's below or underneath the scapula. So we'll actually hide, and we'll fade the scapula. Okay. And we'll do the anatomy search, that way it'll pop up in blue. Come on. There we go, and we are on the left. Okay. And so there it's selected. You can see it's right below the scapula. So if we want to, we'll just go ahead and get rid of the scapula. Okay, so there's the subscapularis muscle. Okay, now rotate it around. Everybody's favorite glamour muscle, biceps brachii muscle. Okay, so this is the forearm flexor. We have our short head, which is medial, and then our long head, which is lateral. Just remember L for lateral. Okay, the long head is lateral. Then the brachialis. So the brachialis muscle is really an interesting muscle. It's right here underneath the biceps brachii. If you want to actually build bulk and make your bicep muscle look larger, you work this brachialis muscle. Now we're going to look at some of the muscles of the anterior portion of the forearm, the first being the brachioradialis muscle. This forms the lateral border of the antecubital fossa. Antecubital just means anterior to the elbow, and so if you've ever had a blood draw performed, and this is important for nursing majors, you look for this. It's called the median cubital vein right here in this antecubital fossa. So the brachioradialis forms the lateral border of that, and then the pronator teres muscle forms the medial border of that fossa. Pronator teres, it pronates the forearm. Okay, so we talked about that motion. You pour out that cup of soup. And now we'll look at the posterior muscles of the upper limb. We'll flip this guy around. Okay. You have your triceps brachii muscles. These are your forearm extensors. These are the muscles on the back of your arm. Okay. You have your lateral head, which is on the lateral side. Okay. Then you have your long head, which is on the medial side, and then the medial head, which is actually the deep muscle. Okay, so you have the lateral, the long, and if you saw the long, it's a pretty long muscle. Okay, and then that medial head, which is the deep medial muscle. And the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle. Okay, so, sorry, it's located along the ulna, And it's a flexor of the wrist. So ulnaris over the ulna, and flexor carpi, flexes the carpals or the wrist. Just another little view. Okay, that is it for the upper limb. We will go ahead and move on to the lower limb. Okay. So when you're talking about the lower limb, your thigh refers to the area between your hip and your knee, the area where your femur is located, and then the leg refers to the area between your knee and your ankle, so where your calf is located. Okay, let's look at the glutes. Okay, so you have your gluteus maximus. This is the largest muscle in your body. Okay, it's a fairly large muscle, makes up kind of the bulk of your posterior area. And we will hide that. Okay, and then you have your gluteus medius, your glute medius. If you get an intramuscular injection, they kindly say that it's in the hip. You get it in your gluteus medius muscle. The reason why you get it here instead of in your gluteus maximus muscle is because you have a huge nerve that runs under this muscle called your sciatic nerve. And it would be terrible if you were getting an intramuscular injection and they accidentally jammed that hypodermic needle into that sciatic nerve. If you've ever had sciatica, then you can kind of imagine how painful that can be. But we'll talk about that nerve when we talk about the nervous system. Okay. Where are we? Okay, and then the gluteus minimus. Okay, maximus means large, medius means middle-sized. Okay, and then you have your minimus, which is the smallest glute muscle. Next is the tensor fasciae lata. This is a muscle on the side of your hip that abducts your thigh. That's not latte, it's lata. Then you have a structure. This is your IT band. Let's move down. Okay, so it's your iliotibial band, your IT band. You might have heard of this before. That is on your lateral thigh. And this attaches down to the lateral condyle of the tibia. So, right there. Then next, what do we have? The piriformis muscle. This muscle is a deep muscle. This gets really sore in runners. It can kind of get tensed up and it can cause some hip problems. So a good way to stretch this out is you can do a figure 4 stretch where you cross one leg and put your ankle on top of your knee and lay on your back, and then put your hands behind your knee and kind of pull your legs up to your chest. I know that's probably not the best explanation in the world, but if you just Google figure 4 stretch, they'll show you better than I can explain it. Okay. Now we will look at, let's look at the anterior thigh. Okay, so your sartorius muscle, this helps with crossing your leg. It runs obliquely across your thigh. I will never forget this muscle. One of the models that I had when I was teaching high school, the sartorius constantly fell off. So that will ever be ingrained in my brain. Okay, and then the quads. Quads, man. Quad means 4. Okay, so we have 4 of these muscles that we're going to look at. And these are leg extensors. So if you think of, if you're sitting down in a seated position and then you straighten your legs out in front of you, you can kind of see some of these quad muscles as they're flexing. So the first one, rectus. Rectus means straight. The rectus femoris muscle. This is a superficial muscle. Okay, and then you have your vastus muscles. Vastus lateralis. Okay, it's the lateral muscle. This is where they give intramuscular injections in infants because their sweet little baby arms are little and wimpy, and so their deltoid muscle is not developed enough to have a hypodermic needle shoved into it. Same thing with their glutes because they haven't started walking, running, and developing those glute muscles. So their gluteus medius is also not developed and bulky enough to take a big, large hypodermic needle. So they lay the baby down and they jam the needle into their vastus lateralis, and it's terrible to watch if you're a mother or a father. Okay. Then the vastus medialis muscle. Okay, medial. Okay, this is a large inner thigh muscle. And then the vastus intermedius, this is deep to the rectus femoris. So hide that rectus muscle. Okay, and so there's the vastus intermedius. Okay, and then you have your gracilis muscle. Okay, so this runs down the interior of your thigh. It adducts your thigh. It goes from your pubis to the medial condyle on your tibia. Okay, so you can see the insertion right down here. Okay, now the posterior thigh, you have your hamstring muscles. Okay, these help to extend your thigh and flex your knee. These are knee flexors. Okay, you have semitendinosus and your semimembranosus. So right here you have your semitendinosus, and then underneath you have your semimembranosus. Okay, so we'll actually just kind of fade this one. Okay, so to remember which one is on top, you can just remember Ted is on top of the mountain. Okay, so semitendinosus is on top of semimembranosus. Okay, and then you have your biceps femoris muscle. Okay, you have your long head, which is lateral, and then you have your short head, a little bitty short head right here, that's deep. And look at the lower limb. Look at the anterior part of the leg. Remember, this part down here is your leg. Up above is the thigh. So the tibialis anterior muscle, this is the prime mover of dorsiflexion and slight inversion. And so if you pull your toes up, you can actually kind of see this muscle contract. This is where a lot of runners get shin splints. Okay, if you've ever had shin splints, those are pretty painful. And we'll flip it around. Okay, you have your gastrocnemius muscle. This is your big calf muscle. On visible body, they don't have it split into the medial head and the lateral head, but you guys are so smart. I'm sure you can figure out which one is the medial head and which one is the lateral head. Okay, then you have your popliteus muscle. We have to hide this gastrocnemius muscle. So this is an important muscle. When you stand straight, your knee joint actually locks in place, and so this muscle helps to unlock your knee joint and helps to flex your knee. And then you have your soleus muscle. This is for plantar flexion, and we've talked about your Achilles tendon, your calcaneal tendon before. Excuse me. And that's it for our muscles. Awesome.